This may be a little bit longer video today, but I wanted to show you how quickly we can do maintenance pruning on a tree that has been well maintained year after year. So I'm going to just jump right in and show you the entire process from start to finish. So you can see here that I bring a ladder around with me, but the goal is to try to maintain the height of a fruit tree at such a point that I don't need to even get into the ladder to do pruning or other maintenance. And some people like to make these first pruning cuts with loppers, and I think that that is a good tool to use, but I find that by using a folding saw, I'm able to just tuck it into my back pocket and pull out the hand pruners when I get to that point. And so by carrying a ladder with me and using a folding saw and hand pruners, I can pretty much get everything done that I need to without having to carry around a ton of tools. And so you can see here I'm just strategically thinning out some of the 4 or 5-year-old branches. I work my way around from one side of the tree, and I'll just kind of rotate clear through until I get back to where I started. Once I'm done removing the big branches with the folding saw, I will pull out my hand pruners and I'll just tip back all the remaining branches, and I'm tipping them back to about where I cut the tree back the previous year. And I've got a few videos about how to do this, but we just identify last year's pruning cut, and then we go down to a nearby fork. We remove that branch below the last year's pruning cut, and then we tip the remaining branch at about the same height as as last year's pruning cut. And by doing that, each and every year you can maintain a tree at the exact same height. The only thing that happens is the tree becomes more and more full every time you tip a branch. It stimulates more lateral growth, and so that's why it's so important that you continue to thin out some of those bigger branches to make room for some of the younger branches that will ultimately replace those older branches. And so I'm about done with the saw cuts. The first go around I was cutting 4 to 5-year-old branches. Second go around I'm doing more like 2-year-old branches, and then with the hand pruners I'll just tip back all the remaining 1-year-old branches, and that will stimulate lateral growth like I said earlier, but it'll also help stimulate the tree to continue to produce spurs on that older wood that's located on the interior of the tree. And by tipping, we are removing some of last year's water sprouts. We're also making room for the light to penetrate that canopy into those spurs, because that's where the fruit is going to be located on an apple tree. And it's a pretty quick process. So one thing that I like to tell people is pruning is a lot like speed reading. There's studies that show the faster you read, the better your comprehension is. And what I find is there's a paralysis by analysis. The more you try to analyze each and every cut, you just become paralyzed by the millions of options that you can choose from. And some people take an entire day to prune a tree this size, but if you just jump in there and move quickly and just kind of use your instincts, you'll be able to get the job done quicker. And I would argue that the quality of your pruning is going to significantly increase if you don't analyze each and every cut. One thing that you do want to take into account is that the tipping occurs at a bud that is pointing in the direction that you want the tree to continue to grow. So if the branch is kind of growing outward, you'll tip it to a bud that's pointing up. If the branch is growing upward, you'll tip the branch to a bud that's growing out. And so what that does is it gives your tree it allows each branch to be about a 45-degree angle, which gives you the best of both worlds as far as opening the tree up, but also keeping it from getting too tall. And that 45-degree angle will give you nice, good, strong branch angles that can support heavy fruit loads. And so, again, on this, I'm starting on one side of the tree, and I'm just working my way around until I get to the back side. Back to where I started. Also, while I'm using those hand shears, if there are any real spindly branches on the interior that aren't producing any spurs, I'll thin those out to continue to open up that canopy to allow more sunlight and airflow into the middle of the tree. But a tree about this size, if it's well maintained and pruned regularly, it's not uncommon to get 80 to 100 pounds of apples each and every year. One thing to remember is even though you're pruning the tree and you're reducing some of the fruiting wood, it's still important that you thin the fruit heavily as soon as you possibly can. And by doing that, you're limiting each spur to one apple. But if you remove the fruit from 40 to 60% of the apples, what you're going to get is those buds at the tip of each spur where no fruit is present. Those will become fruitful the following year. So it's not uncommon for apple trees to go on an alternating every other year cycle. And if there's a fruit hanging on a spur one year, it's not going to produce fruit the next year. And so that's what causes that alternating fruiting cycle. And so it's important that you thin heavily every year so that you're opening up some of those spurs to start developing the microscopic flower parts that are necessary for next year's fruiting season. And so there we go. We're wrapping up with the last couple of cuts. With the intro and the kind of this last little explanation that I'll give in this video. The entire video is 11 minutes long, so you could probably prune a mature apple tree like this in about 10 minutes if you hustle, so you could easily do 6 in an hour. And that wouldn't include the cleanup. You can see there's still a lot of cleanup to do after the pruning is complete. sometimes that takes longer than the pruning itself. So sometimes it's nice to have some guys helping out. Alright, that's it. So, quick pruning. It was about 10 feet tall, 12 feet wide. Now we're down to about 8 feet tall, 10 feet wide. And just a quick maintenance pruning. Opened up the center. You can see we removed quite a bit of branches, but that's by design. We want to maintain this tree at the exact same height as it is now every single year.